Sorry. Go.
Major League Baseball has had a long history of cheating, betting, and corruption. For example, the 1919 Chicago Black Sox were caught throwing or intentionally losing games in the 1919 World Series, and 8 players from that team were given lifetime bans. Another example is the Pete Rose scandal of the 1980s, when he was the manager of the Cincinnati Reds and he was caught betting on games that he was managing. And the third example would be the 2005 to 2006 steroids investigation of baseball. That is probably the most profound of the conspiracies in baseball, but just because of the severity of the implications and the fact that players were cheating the league and cheating the game. So, I did the history of steroid use in baseball. Now, first of all, what are steroids? They're a group of compounds derived from testosterone or is produced synthetically to repair tissue and body growth. They're sold commercially in several different forms: tablets, powdered forms, and solutions that can be injected through needle, which is probably the most popular form among baseball players, at least. They're only prescribed for treatments of diseases like anemia, breast cancer, and also muscle wasting conditions like cancer and AIDS. But they're more popular nowadays to enhance appearance and strength. For example, athletes use these to improve their athletic performance because they make someone bigger, faster, and stronger. Now, with everything, there's a downside. Here's some of the side effects: acne, purple or red spots on body, bad breath, swelling of legs and feet, premature balding, dizziness, mood swings including anger, depression, and aggression. That's not it. Nausea, vomiting, trembling, high blood pressure that can cause damage to the heart and blood vessels, aching joints, greater chances of injuring muscle, liver damage, and shortening of adult life. Those are nothing compared to what the serious side effects are. Serious side effects are gender specific. For women, facial hair growth, loss of feminine body characteristics, for example, shrinking of the breast, and menstrual cycle changes. For men, testicular shrinkage, and I'm not talking about the shrinkage a man gets when they're walking out of a cold shower or a cold pool. Breast development, impotence, if anybody knows what impotence is. Anybody? What is it?
It's where you can't have kids anymore.
No, that's actually sterility. Impotence is the inability to have an erection.
Right.
Alright. So when it comes to steroid use in baseball, there's two different timelines. There's as it was revealed and as it happened. I'm going to talk to you guys about history of steroid use in baseball as it happened. The first known use was in the 1970s by Boston Red Sox pitcher Tom House. He claimed that he used steroids to improve the speed of his fastball. He also claimed that the steroids didn't actually help him, they just gave him severe knee problems, which led to him having 7 knee surgeries and ending his career short. The next guy, Jose Canseco. You're going to hear that name and see that name a lot tonight because he was all over the place. He started using steroids in 1985, liquid testosterone, in the AA level. Now, if you don't know, it's the major leagues up top, and below that is AAA, then AA. He was a bench player for AA. And the very next year, he won Rookie of the Year in the majors in 1986. And obviously, in the next slide, I'll show you a picture of what he looked like, and it's obvious something happened. He would become one of the most infamous users and distributors in baseball history. And there's Jose Canseco before and after. On the left, his rookie season; on the right, in the mid-90s, and there's obviously something happened there. All right, next up in the early 1990s, the Philadelphia Philly Lenny Dykstra used, and in recent news, he's actually been in trouble with bankruptcy, debt, and some problems with a female escort. I won't touch that. His use was actually brought up through a civil suit where he was claimed that he had gambled illegally and that he also used steroids. And in that suit, there was a sworn statement by Jeff Scott, who was a bodybuilder and a convicted steroid dealer, that he had injected Lenny Dykstra more times than he could count. Also in the early 1990s, the Oakland Athletics were implicated, mainly because of one of their athletic trainers, Curtis Wenslaff, was being investigated by the FBI for dealing steroids. And he was arrested for dealing steroids in May 1992. And documents were found with regimens regimens for notable players on the Athletics, such as Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire. Both of these players will be named later in steroids usage. A few years later, in fact, Jose Canseco once again, this time he was with the Texas Rangers. He introduced 3 of his teammates to steroids, including Rafael Palmeiro, Juan Gonzalez, and Ivan Rodriguez. He put all 3 of them on regimens of Winstrol and/or Decadurabolin, which is a liquid testosterone that he started using in 1985, and HGH, which stands for human growth hormone. Also, around this same period, Kurt Radomski. He was another name you're going to hear a lot of in this presentation. He was an athletic trainer, and he began a very long career of dealing steroids around this area. He was a very big part of the 2005-2006 steroids investigation. Next up, in 1996, Ken Caminiti, who was a very good player for the San Diego Padres. In an interview with Sports Illustrated, he actually admitted to using steroids, and he claimed that he used steroids to recover from a shoulder injury. And in this interview, he also estimated that about 50% of players in baseball at that time had used some form of performance-enhancing drug. And he was actually the very first player to admit to using steroids. Remember, up until this point, everything I've told you about steroid use was not known until the mid-2000s. So, around the Caminiti interview, Jose Canseco once again came up. He was with the Oakland Athletics again, and this time he introduced Miguel Tejada to steroids and started him on a regimen. He also was joined again by Mark McGuire and another teammate of his, a new teammate this time, Jason Giambi, who had already started using at this point. And the very next year, Jose Canseco again, this time with the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. He was dealing with teammates Wilson Alvarez, Dave Martinez, and Tony Saunders. And this would be the last time you'd hear or see Canseco in steroids talks until 2001, where he was using in the Anaheim Angels spring training camp. Now in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it's Kurt Radomski again. He was investigated for a second time. He dealt this time to high-profile players Rondell White and David Segui. After that, Brian McNamee came up. He was another athletic trainer. This time he dealt to very high-profile New York Yankee players, such as Jason Grimsley, Andy Pettitte, Chuck Knobloch, and Roger Clemens. And Jason Grimsley is actually the guy who named names of sorts, such as Pettitte and Clemens. 2003, A-Rod failed a drug test. You probably heard of that. That was really big news. Also in 2003, Radomski again, he dealt to around 40 players, such as Miguel Tejada again, Denny Neagle, Mo Vaughn, Paul Duca, Eric Gagne, Mike Stanton. And it was around this time that it got really messy. Jerry Hairston Jr., who was implicated with Radomski in the early 2000s, he was the connection between Radomski and one of the biggest steroid busts in baseball history. That was the Albany DA bust in 2004. It was a grand jury investigation into the sales of steroids, in which 5 pharmacies were connected to selling steroids to Major League players. And I'll skip over this to save some time. After the Albany DA bust was probably the most famous steroid busts in baseball history, which was Balco, which stands for Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, and they were investigated for selling drugs to athletes, including all-time home runs leader Barry Bonds. He was later indicted with 3 counts of perjury and 1 count of obstruction of justice. Along with Bonds was Giambi's brother and Jason Giambi, Gary Sheffield, Benito Santiago, Armando Rios, and Randy Velarde. And there's a picture of Bonds in his rookie year on the left, and one of his last years of his career on the right. And that's probably the most obvious difference. Obviously, something happened, and that something was steroids. And the final year, Rafael Palmeiro finally admitted to using steroids. He tested positive in 2005. Also, Jason Grimsley, who was a user, was finally called by the IRS, and he redacted names of the U.S. to LA Times. A few of them are right there, including Roger Clemens. And the final news was Manny Ramirez was suspended for 50 games for violating the league's drug policy. To recap, I first talked about what steroids are, what are the dangers of steroids and what they can do to the human body, and the implications of steroids in the history of baseball. Thanks.
Thank you.